that have not been answered and could be answered pretty quickly and pretty simply. Alex, you know as well as I do that after every major air disaster, the one thing they do is the National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA, they gather up the wreckage and they take it to some big hangar and they reassemble the plane to find out exactly what happened. Show me a picture of Flight 77 in a hangar, the pieces. Just show me a picture of those pieces, and I will shut up about what happened at the Pentagon.
Or show us all the video cameras from all the hotels and gas stations or the Pentagon. We'll be right back with Jim Mars.
More on For Your Mind.
We're talking to Jim Mars, investigative journalist, best-selling author. He's out at Kent State University right now, left his home in Fort Worth, Texas, to give a big speech that's coming up. We'll tell you about that. But Jim said he's not going to really get into the Pentagon because, well, that's a whole other separate area. But he did mention the fact that every time a plane crashes, they gather all the pieces together, the steel and other items, even from the worst crashes, and they assemble them in a hangar. But on 9/11, the supposed big old passenger jet hits it, and there's not a single piece left. They have a little photo of a piece of aluminum on the ground that has red, white, and blue on it. And then under national security, they went and grabbed all the surveillance cameras. The FBI did from, 3 different hotels, a couple of gas stations. And, of course, the Pentagon has cameras all over it, cameras facing right where the planes came in, but they will not release that. I'm sure they've got some video work going on. I'm sure we'll have a nice thing generated for us. A lot of the witnesses that day, I heard them on the radio, said, yeah, we saw a small jet or a small plane. Most of them said that, but some Rand Corporation employees and a few mainstream media reporters just happened to see this big jet flying and do this. Didn't tear up the ground, didn't overturn cars, though normally a pilot will tell you a jet would do that. But again, we don't even cover that area. I agree with Jim. I don't even really get into that. I could put all this to rest very quickly. But let's talk about what happened at the World Trade Center. I mean, why did NORAD stand down? Why were there drills that morning going on? Why did they call public officials and tell them not to fly?
Exactly.
Jim, please continue.
Well, let's forget about the 2 World Trade Center towers, and let's look at the 3rd tower. And a lot of your listeners are going to be going, what 3rd tower?
Building 7.
Building 7, the Solomon Brothers building, across the street from the World Trade Center, and in between was buildings 5 and 6 that were indeed heavily damaged when the Twin Towers came down. Building 7 was a 47-story steel and concrete office building. And at 5:30 on the evening of September the 11th, it just dropped down on itself into a compact little pile. It was nestled between the U.S. Post Office and the Verizon building, neither of which suffered any substantial damage. And what happened to that? There were no planes hit that building. There were no seemingly out-of-control fires. There was a few little fires in the building. What we know is that Larry Silverstein, the owner of the World Trade Center complex, told, and I have seen the interview on public television, he said the fire employees said they weren't sure they were going to be able to get out the fires real quick, so he said he decided, well, let's pull it. And then we stood there while they pulled it, okay? Now, this is obviously a designed and calculated building demolition. And I can also tell you from having covered numerous building demolitions that you don't run into a burning building and throw some explosives around and bring that building down onto its own tracks. Okay, this means this building was pre-wired for demolition days, weeks, months ahead of time, which raises the very real and serious possibilities that the World Trade Center was brought down by explosives, not by airplanes.
Okay, let's stop right there for a second. Again, you covered this in Inside Job. In my book, Descent into Tyranny, that I put out 2 years ago, we show the building, we go over the documents. AP reporters were told, get back by firefighters, we're going to bring it down. In about 11 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Giuliani got a call and was told, get out of the building. It's going to be coming down, too, when there wasn't even a fire there. And 2 small fires started, and then it imploded hours later. No modern steel building had ever collapsed from fire. This day, 3 of them did, but the general public buys the lie that jet fuel did this in Tower 1 and 2. Well, I've been to Ground Zero, just there a few months ago for the Republican convention. Folks, there were buildings that were owned by Silverstein literally 20, 30 feet on both sides of it that had light damage even when it fell. Then between it and Tower 1 and 2 were 5 and 6 that did have some damage, some great damage when Towers 1 and 2 fell. They did catch fire. They had buildings fall on them, but they still didn't collapse. So you have these buildings across the street. It's so far away, you got to be there to experience this, that aren't even damaged, but right in the middle of them, all his properties were basically destroyed. This thing suddenly catches fire. The CIA, FBI, city, Port Authority, command center was there. They'd already pulled the brains of it out 2 days before for Operation Tripod 2. It was actually going on that morning. And then the FEMA spokesman later said, of course, on CBS that we were there the night before September 11th for a drill. Then they said, oh, that isn't true. But then Giuliani got up before the commission and said, yes, that was all true. So these guys can't get their lines straight. And then on top of all of this, we have the seismograph showing the classical signature of explosions. But since you mentioned that PBS America Rebuilding documentary, we got this footage a couple years ago. We posted it on Infowars.com. There's a section about this on the sites. Here is Larry Silverstein. Now, again, this film is about rebuilding, folks. So they're describing how Building 7 was rebuilt first because it was the furthest away from the complex and completely fell. Then they cut to the day of the event, show video of Building 7 falling that afternoon at 5:30, and Silverstein says that we made the decision to pull it, gave the order, and watch it fall. Then we'll play from the same documentary where months later they demolished what was left of 5 and 6, where the engineer from the city describes pulling it as demolition. Then we play Dan Rather 30 seconds after Building 7 fell, replaying it saying, looks like dynamite. Here is that first clip, ladies and gentlemen, of Larry Silverstein.
World Trade Center 7 had always been considered the starting point for rebuilding. Located north of the slurry wall, 7 had been cleared faster than the rest of the site, and there had been no bodies to recover. Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed, 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such a terrible loss of life. And the smartest thing to do is pull it.
All right, go ahead and pause.
Decision.
Yeah, for some reason, we're playing these off the computer file, and because I told them to play the 3 clips separate, it's causing problems.
Right.
This is what I want you to do, John. I want you to play them all back to back. Just go ahead and play them. Play them all back to back. Here they are. This is CBS and 2 clips from PBS. So here they are. Go ahead and play them back to back.
World Trade Center 7 had always been considered the starting point for rebuilding. Located north of the slurry wall, 7 had been cleared faster than the rest of the site, and there had been no bodies to recover. Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed, 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such a terrible loss of life. And the smartest thing is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
By mid-December, the Department of Design and Construction had leveled World Trade Center buildings 4 and 5.
Hello? Oh, we're getting ready to pull Building 6.
We have to be very careful how we demolish Building 6. We were worried about the Building 6 coming down and then damaging the slurry wall, so we wanted that particular building to fall within a certain area.
Again, what you're seeing are crash shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Describe that. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building. It's amazing. Amazing, incredible, picky word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before when a building was deliberately destroyed by world-class dynamite to knock it down. And
All right, again, folks, you can go to Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.com and stream those off the web. That's what we were doing. We must have a lot of traffic right now because it was kind of hiccuping a bit. I apologize about that. But I have the video I ordered from PBS. It is aired about 10 times on PBS. Incidentally, now, they do not show that video. They do not show it anymore, Jim. Go ahead.
That's right. Now, if Building 7 was pulled, or in other words, a controlled demolition, then we have to consider that the World Trade Center towers were controlled demolitions. And I believe they were, and here's how they flummoxed even the experts. Because having covered controlled implosions before, they usually go from the ground up. They blow the ground floor, the second floor, third floor, etc., so that the building settles down on itself. In the case of the World Trade Centers, they simply reversed the process. They blew it from the top down, and this is what caused even some of the experts to go initially, well, that looks like a building implosion, but I guess not.
And I've interviewed probably, 5, 6 different agreed practicing structural engineers here on the show. We have stills on Fox News, clearly of blast points as the explosives are going off top down.
Exactly. And I was in Washington not long back, and there were some 2 or 3 or 4 New York firemen who came down to attend this convention where I was speaking, and we got to talking. And they all said that among the New York firemen, they all still talk about the bombs and the explosions that were going off in series in the World Trade Center towers, but that they've all been admonished not to speak publicly about this, or they would lose their jobs and their pensions and everything else.
I was in New York, and I would give these speeches in front of literally hundreds of police, and you see a few firemen walking around, and they look scared to death. I saw some of them nodding their heads while I was talking, Jim.
Right. They know, but Alex, it's the same thing that I saw in Dallas after the Kennedy assassination. Everybody in Dallas knew the lone nut thing did not work, that something else had happened, but they were scared to death, and none of that information ever got outside of Dallas. I saw the same thing in Oklahoma City when I went up there to look into the Murrah building.
We got a break. Stay there, Jim. We'll be right back. Asking him to play those clips, but I wanted to back up what he was saying and what his book gets into. Jim, as you said with the case with Dallas or Oklahoma City or the first World Trade Center bombing, where they admit the FBI cooked the bomb and trained the driver, it comes out, but then no one's ever prosecuted in the government over and over again. But we have the owner, Larry Silverstein, slipping up or throwing it in our face, saying that they blew it up. We have the firefighters telling the press, get back, we're pulling Building 7. That was in the Associated Press. We have Giuliani saying they were told to get out of the building. And then clearly Tower 1 and 2 were blown as well. But you think on purpose they throw this on our face now?
Yeah, they're pretty arrogant. They almost are to the point to where they don't care. It's like, we're in control. What are you going to do about it? Let's go back and look at the World Trade Centers briefly and go back and look at the whole history of it. First off, they were a boondoggle from the word go. Once they were built, I know I've been to New York many times, and most New Yorkers hated the towers. They thought they destroyed the beauty of the skyline. But more importantly is when the World Trade Center towers were opened for business, it suddenly opened so much office space that land values in lower Manhattan actually dropped. So the whole thing's kind of been a white elephant. So in early 2001, though, they just about had a sale ready to go. They were going to sell the whole complex, okay? But it fell through because they found out that the towers had been built with asbestos in them, and it was going to cost more than $1 billion to get the asbestos out of there. Well, of course, that's not economically feasible. So now they're stuck with these buildings they can't sell, they can't renovate, they can't do anything with them. And so Silverstein, the titular owner, takes out 3 separate insurance policies on them, and
to make clear, he only owed Building 7 in the past. Right before 9/11, for just a couple $100 million, he buys both of them and takes out $3 billion in insurance.
That's right. And in most insurance policies, they will not insure you against terrorist attacks because they can't predict them. But he insisted that they all 3 policies had a clause in there that specifically said they will pay off on if there's a terrorist attack. Now, it gets better. He is sharing this insurance money with, of course, the mortgage holders, one of which is Blackstone Group, which is, its CEO is Pete Peterson, head of the Council on Foreign Relations. So you can see the interconnectedness of the people involved with this thing and some of the motives that were in place for bringing these structures down.
Well, obviously, that they do a cost-benefit analysis. They need something to target in the staged event. They pick something that's an economic trouble for them. It gets rid of a problem. Then Bush blocked the $97 million, this is admitted MSNBC, for treatment for all the firemen and police and others. They got sick from the asbestos. The EPA's own report said it's in the air. Everybody's getting sick. And then they say, no, we're not even going to give the cops and firemen treatment.
I know it, and then Bush has the audacity to launch his campaign for re-election this time, showing the first aid workers coming, and the firemen and the policemen, and acting and using them to stir emotions in his favor when he blocks payment for their health benefits. It's absolutely unconscionable. Now, what was in Building 7? Well, there were CIA offices. There was Mayor Giuliani's fortified bunker, which he never even used. But there was also, and this is the most important, offices of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And guess what was lost when Building 7 came down?
Enron, WorldCom, all of it.
Exactly.
All those investigations.
All of those comms and all of those oil companies and all of those scandal-ridden corporations that, of course, were tied into Bush and Cheney and all the rest of the leadership of this country.
They always do things that are multifaceted, and and then of course, Bush's younger brother ran security for the entire complex. His contract ended on 9/11. That was from 2 years before, set for that date. And then the uncle of the president, the former president's brother, he ran security at Boston Airport. So boy, it just keeps happening.
That's right. Now let's get to how could that have all happened? You know, how could 19 Muslim fanatics being directed by a cleric with a computer in a cave in Afghanistan defeat our $40 billion defense and intelligence budget, okay? Well, it's pretty simple. First, Bush puts Cheney in charge of a counter-terrorism task force, which then puts him over the FAA, NORAD, all of the various agencies and organizations charged with our protection. And what happens on the morning of 9/11? They're running a series of war game exercises to include sending most of our fighter interceptors out over the ocean or up into Canada because they're doing a Cold War scenario, even though the Cold War has been over with for 10 years.
We'll be right back and talk about the orders of the 3-hour broadcast someday. We got Paul Watson coming up in about 27 minutes. We're about to go to Clayton and Tom and Tim and Bert and he's right on with 9/11. And again, when I start throwing info in when he makes a claim, it's because I want to bolster what he's saying, folks. It's documented. It's real. We both have the evidence. This is public stuff. We'll be talking to Jim again here in just a second. Here's that clip one more time, isolated. We played it off the web earlier off InfoWars. It was hiccuping. Here's the isolated clip of Larry Silverstein, the owner, saying they pulled the building, gave the order, watched it come down, talking about Building 7. Here it is.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. We've had such a terrible loss of life. And this one of the things to do is pull. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
And they watched Building 7 full. Now understand, Jim Murr's the best-selling author. He puts this on his site, his books. I put it in films. I put it in my book. It's on my website, the clips of the TV show. I've been saying this now for 2 years. A year and a half since Silverstein made the comment. For 2.5 years I've been making this claim with the evidence. We have it all posted. Say he did it. We've called his office probably 15 times, and he will not comment on it to any media. No one. The media will not talk about it. I mean, if there had been a murder, and I was a suspect, and I went on TV and said, I killed her, and then somebody went out and said, he says he killed her, and if it wasn't true, wouldn't you defend yourself? I mean, it's bonkers. So we'll go to your calls here in just a moment. Folks, I've made 11 films. The 11th film is out. It's American Dictators, documenting the staged election of 2004. This film will be more important after the election than it even is now, because it shows the false left-right paradigm, how it's all staged, skull and bones, how they're identical on policies, just different on rhetoric. We get into all of it. And so you need to get this film. People are kidnapped by somebody and they finally love their kidnapper and they'll fight back against those that try to free them. But stop having the Stockholm Syndrome. Stop serving the man that knocks your teeth out with a crowbar. I mean, literally, it's pathetic. Stop being cowards. I don't mean our general listeners, but some of you out there. This is the facts. Join us. Major poll, New York. Half New Yorkers think the government's behind 9/11. 67% think they had prior knowledge. And it's even higher in some groups. We're going to win this fight. But we can't wait 40 years for 92% of people to know the government killed Kennedy in major polls. We can't wait that long. We've got to get those numbers up now. 1-888-253-3139 to get my videos. These calls. How do folks get a copy of Inside Job, Unmasking the 9/11 Conspiracies?
Well, they can go to InsideJob-911.com, which is dedicated strictly to this book, or they can also check out my personal website, jimmars.com. That's JIMMARRS.com. If you're not on the internet, you can call 1-800-247-6553. One more time, that's 800-247-6553. Now, Alex, before we get to the calls, I got one big question for you. What do you suppose is going to happen after next November the 2nd, the next day, if it is perceived by most of the people in this country that the election was somehow dummied, corrupted, or unfair?
I am predicting riots in at least 10 cities. I am predicting, even the people think that there's been some type of cheating going on, there's already a lot of violence. Al Gore's having to beg Democrats not to be violent. I mean, their stage theater is angering people. And, again, to the Democrats out there, it is staged, folks. When Bush is reelected, as I'm predicting, understand it was staged from the beginning, so please don't go out and start burning down cities, because that's going to give them a pretext. That'll be their terrorist attack they need, and you don't want to end up like Mrs. Snellgrove, who got her eyeball blown out last Thursday. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much right on the same page with you. If there is a violent backlash, which there's very likely, if there's even the perception of misconduct in this election, or even if it's thrown for days or weeks and sent back to the Supreme Court, and that's exactly what the neocons would love to see, because then they can say, see, we're the only ones who can bring peace and tranquility to these cities and to this rabble.
I totally agree with you. We're going to go to calls here in just a moment. Anything else you wanted to add about 9/11? You brought up so many key issues. I want to just briefly say that they were running all these drills on the morning of 9/11. The CIA, this is the Associated Press, I got it from Stanley Hilton 2 months before it was in the AP from people he's deposed in NORAD.
Right, and who was in charge of all that? Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney is at the center of the spider web. He's in charge of counterterrorism. He's in charge of the war games. And then that leads us to one more thing I'd like to add. You go back to when Dick Cheney was Secretary of Defense under the first Bush administration. He issued a defense guidance policy paper, which stated that with the collapse of communism, it was our obligation, nay, our duty, to move troops into the Middle East, to invade Afghanistan, to force a regime change in Iraq, and to gain control over the oil resources of the Middle East.
But that a crisis was needed.
Right, and then in September 2000, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Pearl, all of these neocons were part of the Project for New American Century, a neocon think tank, and they issued a position paper echoing the very goals that Cheney had set out back in Bush 1, but they added that
a Pearl Harbor event was needed to catalog.
That's right. Needed a new Pearl Harbor before the American people would accept this, and of course they got it on 9/11.
And again, for those that just joined us, when I keep finishing Jim's sentences and he finishes mine, that's to show you, me and Jim have only talked 4 or 5 times on other people's radio shows. My producer just called and set him up. I never even talked to him. And see, we're finishing each other's sentences.
That's right, and I'll vouch for that. It's not that he's reading my book or I'm looking at Alex's DVDs, although I have. The point is, when you go and study the information, it's simply there.
It's a fact. And then you have to get past the fear. And believe me, I mean, Jim, you ever wake up in the middle of the night and go, Man, this is crazy. I'm really into something. This stuff is real. Life is really this nuts. People really are taking microchips to keep their jobs in law enforcement, and they really are building camps, and they really did run drills on the morning of 9/11 of flying planes into the very buildings that were hit at the very same time as the real thing was happening for NORAD to stand down. I mean, this is criminality out in the open.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you're aware, Alex, that they have scheduled massive anti-terrorist drills for Election Day,
which could be used as another cover. And by the way, they said they're going to be out at over 300 polling places around the states with the riot police to intimidate people.
Exactly. Now, you know, I could see it. What do you think about this scenario? Voting starts on the East Coast, and as the sun moves westward, it looks like that the Bush and the neocons might be facing a defeat. So all of a sudden, there's a terrorist. The terrorist alert goes to red. There's troops in the street. They say we have reports of a dirty bomb attack in some city. Please remain in your homes.
Chicago.
Keep everybody from the polls, and then they get in by default.
And again, we're not saying this is going to happen, but it could, because the White House told U.S. News and World Report 3 months ago the Capitol will be attacked, and they said, well, maybe, and then no, now that's not going to happen. And the same day they reversed themselves today and say, okay, it may happen. Again, they've got all their options open. It's incredible. Let's go to the calls quickly. Thanks for holding. Clayton in Missouri, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Good morning, Alex. How you doing?
Good.
I was watching NBC Evening News yesterday, and a reporter named Lisa Myers did a report on Lyndon LaRouche, and she's all been out of shape because Lyndon LaRouche is receiving federal matching funds. And there's 3 things that really stick in her craw. The first one is that Lyndon LaRouche is saying that America is on the verge of an economic collapse. Number 2, that 9/11 was an inside job. And number 3, that the Queen Elizabeth was behind the Oklahoma City bombing. I'm not sure about number 3, but I believe he's correct on the first 2.
No, it's absolutely true. And the question to Jim is, why would they bring this up in the middle of the election?
Well, I think they brought it up because obviously the reporter was upset that he was getting matching funds. The point there, though, is simply, hey, he qualifies. Anybody qualifies gets matching funds. And I don't know why they should get upset about it, except that here's an outside voice voicing things that is outside the carefully crafted script of the Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
Exactly. Anything else, Clayton?
Second question to your guest. I believe that on September 11th, our technology is called Global Hawk, was used on the 2 airplanes.
Well, we don't know which particular company, sir. That's just one company, but since 1958, they've been remote controlling aircraft for drills to shoot down jets. JFK, older brother, Bobby Sr., he died remote controlling in a B-17 loaded with explosives. He was in a chase plane with a P-38 Lightning behind it. I mean, they've been doing this forever.
That was in World War II.
Yeah, that was in World War II.
So, yes, they definitely have the capability. In fact, in my book, Inside Job, I detail how in the summer of 2001, just a month or so before 9/11, a Boeing 737 lifted off from Edwards Air Force Base, flew all the way to Australia, flew 12 missions, and then flew back to Edwards, landed safely, and all by remote control. So, yes, the technology
It's
exists.
ancient. It's totally ancient. Clayton, thanks for the call. Great points. Tim in Ohio, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Alex. Hello, Jim.
Hey, Tim.
I recorded your secret societies on Coast to Coast, and I have listened to that at least once a week. Thanks, both you gentlemen, for doing that show. What I found out here is, like, we're through, it's Alice in Wonderland with these people. We're through the looking glass. Whatever they say, they think the opposite, and that is usually to be true.
Yes.
That's a good way to look at it. I'm like the fellow who says, I don't believe anything's true until the government denies it.
Right. That's right. And, you know, you look at all the smoking guns in 9/11, the 3 things that stick out in my mind, the drills, the stocks, and the collapse, the physical collapse of that alone. You know, you look at the mathematics of it, it would have taken more than a minute for that collapse to happen had it pancaked floor to floor.
Well, I know,
like they said.
I know I'm repeating myself, but to stand at ground zero and to see other people's buildings that were right up against Tower 1 and 2 that didn't have any damage or light damage, and then every building this guy owns, when they're across the street, way far away, Building 7, it catches fire, falls down, and buildings right next to it aren't even damaged. It is unbelievable.
And then you have to bring in Marvin Bush there and the Kuam Corporation that did security for those buildings, correct? Along with Washington Dulles and the World Trade Center.
And you know, one of the questions is that, well, when would they have had opportunity to wire the building? Well, the weekend before, according to at least two people I've talked to who officed in the trade centers, they said that they had drills. They evacuated the building. They shut off all of the electricity. Plenty of time right there to pre-wire those buildings.
That was in the New York Daily News.
Right.
And then also, they, not just that weekend, then they also shut down a few floors for like a week for special maintenance.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. One quick question, if I can get off subject just for a minute, but maybe I did indirectly come back to it. The substance on the, I read your book, Alien Agenda, and the substance on the moon, helium-13, they seem to be very interested in going back to the moon after they discovered all of that up there. Now, are they trying to get Halliburton in control of this helium-13 as possibly the next energy source after they find the last drop of oil?
Yeah, now you're touching on the deepest, darkest secret going, which is the manipulation of energy at the atomic or subatomic level. You're into zero-point energy, and you're into the molecular structure that they may be able to tap to get free energy. And, of course, they don't want us to know about this.
Arthur C. Clarke, the inventor of the communications satellite, says that he's already seen the evidence. They already have 0 point.
Yes. But they don't want us to know that because, number one, we demand an end to the oil economy, and number two, they'd all lose their jobs and their monopolies.
By the way, I mean, Arthur C. Clarke wasn't just a science fiction writer, of course he's still alive. That guy still has top security clearances.
Right.
He's one of their little futurists. Thanks for the call, Tim. Let's talk to Tom in Boston. Tom, thanks for holding for Eon and on the hour with Jim Mars.
Oh, I can't believe it. I'm talking to two Texas heroes at the same time. This is really awesome. When I called in, I actually didn't know that Tim was on the show. It's real funny. We had Alex here in Boston, you know, where all the young kids learn to, you know, a lot of them are going to be these Illuminati pawns. We had Alex for about 3 months, and then suddenly that turned into Mexican radio without warning. It was all in Spanish, and he just disappeared. And I've been listening to him online ever since. Actually, I had called in with a little bit of the Snellgrove story, which I think
I'm glad you called because I wanted to get Jim to talk about a story. He worked for the Fort Worth Telegram, and he told a story of years ago. Briefly tell that story one more time and how it ties into Snellgrove.
Right. Well, it just gives us some insight into police mentality, okay? Having covered police for years and years, my caveat is that they have a tough road to hoe, and I really feel very empathetic with the police officers out there, and most of them are doing their damnedest to do a really good job. But there is a police mentality, a cop mentality, which is they view the world strictly in black and white. You're either with them or you're against them. And if they're sent against a crowd, you know, they don't stop to think, well, maybe these are just good folks who are trying to voice their opposition to something.
Well, now they've been militarized, and the military kills an enemy.
Exactly.
A
It's
peace
military
officer defuses.
process. They're the enemy. We got to do something about it. So what Alex is referring to is years ago in Fort Worth, Texas, which is one of the more moderate and safe, secure cities going. It's a pretty nice place to be. And the police department asked the city council, and they wanted to requisition money for a flamethrower. And one of the council members, you know, says, wait a minute, what do you need a flamethrower for? And their response was, for crowd control.
One question for Jim.
Stay there. We're talking about the speech you're about to give this evening, and 7,000 people came out to hear Michael Moore, but there wasn't any information. Tell folks what you told me during the break.
That's right. Well, he had Roseanne Barr with him and a musician, and, you know, it was quite a happening, and it was pretty good, but it was kind of it was just a feel-good cheer, mainly get out the vote, which nobody can argue with that. And then, of course, a big subtle campaign for Kerry. It was, he had a whole rap he had about, so goodbye Bush, goodbye neocons. And the only gripe I had was that here's 7,000 people who should have been informed as to the facts of 9/11. And just like in his film, he doesn't devote any space whatsoever to the events of 9/11. It's all about other things. That's why my talk is titled Beyond Fahrenheit 9/11, or There's More to the Story, Dude. And
And how do folks hear that? How do folks hear that tonight?
I'm at Kent State University at the Michael Schwartz Center Auditorium, 7:30 tonight, Monday. Students are free, and there's a sliding scale of $5 to $20 for admission. And we're going to talk about the facts. We're going to talk about the very things that you and I have been talking about here on the radio this morning. And by the way, as fellow Texan, let me tell you my biggest gripe about George W. Bush. That guy is no more a Texan than I am a New Yorker. Everybody thinks he's a Texan. They're Connecticut carpetbaggers, right?
That's what I say.
He comes down and loots our state and then springboards with all that massive money behind him and starts looting the country.
Have you ever seen him when he slips out of the Texas accent and goes into that Atlantic accent?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, folks, I don't care if you're from the Eastern Seaboard. I love you to death. I'm not into all that. The point is, I'm not going to come to New Jersey or Connecticut and start acting like I'm one of you.
That's right.
I mean, it's fake. It's just as fake as this woman at Saturday Night Live and I lip syncing. Just as fake as Terry out there duck hunting.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm tired of phoniness. Who was the last caller we were talking to? Tom, finish up what you were saying. We're going to go to Bert, Vince, John, and Fred. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, sir. Well, I have to say that Alex is a big hero in New York, no doubt. I can't wait to see your new video, read Jim's book. Jim, there's one thing that you were talking about that just came to mind that I've probably read already 5 books, Alex's book on the subject, Paul Watson's, but the insurance angle, all right, I understand how that was set up, but the one thing I don't understand, I will take my answer off the air, sir, is why, with all this evidence out there, I've worked for an insurance company in the past myself, why didn't they say,
I've got the answer. Because the insurance companies are the banks, are the system, just like the airlines are part of the system and kept their mouths shut. Because the airlines got $25 billion, and because the globalists did deals to make the insurance companies more money. The insurance companies are the New World Order. Jim?
Absolutely. You answered the question. It's all the same bunch.
All right, thanks for the call, Tom. Let's talk to Bert in Ohio. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing, Alex?
Good, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that Mr. Mars is in Ohio. We have a gentleman running for Congress here in Ohio, Jim Cotton Jr., and he did a 2-part series on Building 7 and everything else that you own is well documented too last night. And he also mentioned something about a PBS interview with the Silverstone.
We just ran. Alex just ran that.
Oh, is that what that was? Oh,
yeah.
okay. Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the... finish up, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about Dr. Hugh Ross. I guess you don't really have time. You want to break now, so...
Well, go ahead and finish the question.
Okay, I just want to know if you were familiar with Dr. Hugh Ross's work, Light the Sky, Little Green Men. Because I've read his book, so...
All right, we'll be right back to the third Oscar 9/11 conspiracies. Jim Mars is our guest, inside-job-911.com. And, of course, we'll give you a toll-free number here in just a moment. This is his final segment with us. He's been with us for the last hour and a half. I guess some of you missed it. Then we got Paul Watson to cover all the news, latest developments coming up here in about 5 minutes. Vince in Illinois, thanks for holding. You're on the air with Jim Mars. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mars. Your book was the basis for Oliver Stone's movie JFK, which was a masterpiece of filmmaking. And I was wondering if you have any direct contact or any line with Oliver Stone that you might be able to pass along your 9/11 book, Inside Job, to him and maybe get more filmmaking from Oliver Stone.
I think that's an excellent idea. And, yes, I have sent a copy of the book to him, but, look at the grief and the flack he's gotten on JFK. It may be that he's a little tired of fighting that fight.
Yeah, I've actually had some contact with Stone. He's considered doing a Waco movie. But again, he can get too much flack on that as well.
Yeah, he's a great man, Oliver Stone. At the very least, Alex, maybe you can get him as a guest on your show. And all the listeners out there, if you've never seen JFK, that is just a contemporary masterpiece of filmmaking.
Well, I love the summation at the end. When the Garrison character's laying it all out. Thanks for the call.
That summation was pretty much word for word taken out of my book, Crossfire.
John in Ohio, you're on the air. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, before I get to the Michael Moore appearance at Kent that I saw last night, I'd like to mention that last Saturday I was listening to Radio Havana, Cuba on 6 on the shortwave dial, and they had a featured news item about the violation of the human rights of children and Americans through this Freedom Initiative, this drugging of school children. They quoted Ron Paul and all the other
we're in
critics.
trouble when Cuba's having to stop us from the police state. We got about a minute left. Finish up.
I was at that pep rally at
That's
Penn
a
State.
good characterization.
Yeah, and I did see some powerful statements against the war when he pointed out that this was a war that couldn't be won and should not be won, and the Rage Against the Machine guest that he brought on said that these 2 millionaires are not going to end the fight against this sort of thing. So there was just a small ray of light along those lines.
Right.
And I also wanted to point out that Michael Moore, I think, is suppressing, because I saw on the 9/11truth.org website, which goes into a lot of this, that he apparently gave an endorsement to that. So he knows these things, and yet he apparently, for some counterproductive tactical reason, is suppressing it.
Hey, look, I appreciate the call, John. I ran up to Michael Moore in New York, put a camera in his face nicely, and said, why aren't you talking about the NORAD stand down the drills? And he said, because that would be un-American. And then his bodyguards assaulted me, rammed into me. I rammed right back into him. That's on video.
Well, let me put it this way. I saw an interview with Michael Moore, and the interviewer asked him, what is your fondest desire? And he said, I'd really like to be invited to dinner at the White House. So that pretty well tells you where he's coming from.
Unbelievable. Fred in Pennsylvania, you got about 45 seconds. Go ahead.
I just want to say that there is a patent that does cover a system to take over control of an aircraft.
I mean, they had it in World War II.
Yeah, they've had that. I wanted to ask quickly.
What do people think drones are? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask quickly. The Rick Burns film New York has a color still of an aircraft about to crash into the World Trade Center with I guess you call it a disc-shaped rear section, and some people think that photo is a hoax, but I'm not sure, and I wanted to know
I'll have to
if you
answer
heard
that
about
out. Jim Mars, give him the toll-free number to get your book.
The toll-free number is 1-800-247-6553. My brief answer to that caller is that I've looked at films and...
You know what? You're going to have to stay there. You're going to have to break. Got to break, Jim. Just stay there 2 more minutes. In operations of the New World Order, there is a chance to use this disaster for the New World Order. The New World Order can emerge. The film documents dozens of confirmed cases of government-sponsored terrorism worldwide. We ripped the sinister Patriot Act legislation 1 and 2 apart, piece by piece, and reveal the arrogance of what Ashcroft has to say about your liberty. You will lose your liberty. Homeland Security, executive orders, forced vaccinations, the new prison economy, the Total Information Society, the Pan-American Union, federal gun grabs, government-run white slavery rings, and much, much more. If you want to understand what the New World Order really is, then my new 2.5-hour video, Police State 3, is for you. Visit Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.com to order or call toll-free 1-888-253-3139. That's 888-253-3139. Order today and spread the word.
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
All right, in about a minute and a half, a gigantic news blitz is coming up with Paul Watson and myself. Just all the news, cover it in rapid fire, then take your calls, give callers a little bit more time than they've gotten earlier today. It's just me and Jim Mars Tim Mars and I have had so much to talk about here with this new book, Inside Job, talking about 9/11. Jim, a caller called in. We hit that last break, talking about missile pods, the rest of it, the Pentagon. I've mainly ignored all that, not because I don't think it could be possible, but because there's this mountain of other evidence that's 110%. Your comments?
Right. I am familiar with the Northwoods documents where they talk about taking a military plane, disguising it as a commercial airliner, and causing havoc with it, you know. He was talking about the photographs that seemed to show some kind of object on the bottom of this plane, something that would not fit with a normal Boeing of that type. And I have looked at several different photographs from several different angles and all of the film, and there definitely seems to be some sort of anomaly on that plane. I've even checked with pilots who fly those craft, and we're not sure what that is. Something very strange about that, but nobody, and myself included, is in a position to say, oh, it's this, you know. One of the only theories I've heard that seems to make some sense would be that it would have been an extra fuel pod to add extra fuel to make sure that there was a huge raging fire that they could blame for the collapse of the buildings.
All right, and we talked during the break about, I think we're going to win this thing, you think we will, and we talk to people in government all the time. They seem to be waking up at record levels. The globalists have got a problem if all their minions don't sign out orders, which is another reason they're trying to go to automation, even with ground mini battle tanks and drones and everything else. By 2010, half the combat Air Force aircraft are going to be drone controlled.
That's right.